Shabbat Shalom. As we start with something new, you will find the words on our screens on either side. Be bold as you get comfortable. Please join with us. Open the door. Open your eyes. Open your heart. See what's inside. That repeats. Lay down your walls. Lay down your fears. Lean into love. You are welcome here. Maker of day. Maker of night. Feed me with song. Let me be your light. Hine matov u'mana'im. Shevet achim gam yachad.
So this, yeah, maybe. Maybe no. Stay right there.
There you are.
Oh, yeah. This week's Torah, the first ever temple building project, which, by the way, raised more than what the campaign was asking for, is actually a mirror of this moment. For by bringing all the stuff, crafting all the pieces that fit together to make the Mishkan, the portable sanctuary, God's presence in the midst of all the people, Israel built something more. They created a sacred community, bound together by common purpose, linked by a shared care that helped them know their connection reflected the Holy One. So are sharing this Shabbat an opening of heart, a leaning into love that helps every person know, praying punim to punim, reaching not alone up but out. We're creating a sacred space where the Holy One could feel right at home.
Open the door. Open the door. Open your eyes. Open your heart. See what's inside. Lay down your walls. Lay down your fears. Lean into love. You are welcome here. Maker
As always, we begin with light. We've already created sparks of light with that beautiful opening, a song that uplifts everybody, lets them know that they have found their way home. But we call our B'nai Mitzvah families to come on up, whoever wants to share, and we share in kindling Shabbat light.
As these Shabbat candles, let me take this off.
On page 121, we're going to interrupt you many more times. 121.
As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we by our lives give light to all who behold us.
As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we, in our own day, be among those who kindle light.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
We turn the page as we rise for Kiddush. All right, Perry, your cup.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho be'ahava u'bratzon hinchilanu, zikaron lema'aseh bereshit, ki hu yom techila lemikra'e kodesh, zecher letziat Mitzrayim, ki vanu v'acharta be'otanu kidashta mikol hamim, v'shabbat kodshecha be'ahava uvratzon hinchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh hashabbat. Amen. L'chaim. You know, Rabbi, most everyone knows who you are. I'm Cantor Katie Orangel, and you may notice tonight I'm going to be joined by Lexi Weekly,
How
who
awesome
is
is that?
potentially not a face you are as used to. She teaches so many of our young people as our song leader, so she's going to be joining us tonight on the Bima.
Thank you for having me.
Turn to page 130 and join both of us as we welcome Shabbat. Lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena l'Adonai. Lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena l'Adonai. we turn to welcome the Sabbath bride on page 138, verses 1, 2, 5, and 9. That was 8. You tried to trick me up. Lecha dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekavela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekavela. Shamor v'zachor b'dibor echad hishmi'anu, el hameyuchad Adonai echad, u'shemo echad l'shem ol tiferet ve'eli tila. Lecha dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekavela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekavela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, ki hi mekor haberacha merosh mikedem nesucha sof ma'aseh b'machshavat tehila. Lecha dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekavela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekavela. Hitoreri ki va'orech, kumi ori shir daberi kevod Adonai alayik nigla. Lecha dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekavela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekavela. Boi v'shalom ha'terep ba'ala, gam besimcha u'v'tzola toch emunei am segula. Boi chala, lecha dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekavela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekavela. Hold on. Yep.
Now that we have greeted Shabbat and taken a moment to greet one another, we join our voices together as one Kehillah. Our call to worship, Baruch, page 146. Please rise.
Yeah.
Remain standing if you are able, joining together in this blessing for evening, the top of page 149. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars, creator of the tide of time and light. You guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Baruch atah Adonai, Hama'ariv Aravi. And continuing together on the bottom of 151. Wisdom and wonder, passion and instruction, story and symbol. All these things your Torah gives to us. And the more we devote ourselves to it, the more it grows and gives. What could be a truer token of your abiding love than this holiest of your works and the living language that gives it form? Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. 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 Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto, Leolam Va'ed.
Be seated.
Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha bechol levavcha ubechol nafshecha ubechol meodecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha Veshinantam levanecha, vedibarta bam, beshivtecha b'veitecha, uvlechtecha v'derech, uvshochbecha uvkumecha, uvshartam leot al yadecha, vehayu letotafot beineinecha, uvtavtam al mezuzot beitecha uvisharecha leman tizkeru va'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'nitem kedoshim lelohechem ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeiti etchem Eretz Mitzrayim, liot lachem Elohim, ani Adonai Elohechem.
On the top of 157, standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands, marching together.
On the next page, our Micha Molcha this evening, the last time you heard this, we heard this, was at my installation. This was written for us. So as in the weeks to come you get used to it, please start to sing along. And for tonight, Lexi's going to help us out. Micha Molcha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar ba'kodesh. Mi kamocha ba'elim Adonai,
נהדר בקודש. נורות תהילות, אוסף אלה, אוסף אלה. נורות תהילות, אוסף אלה, אוסף אלה. מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נהדר בקודש, מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נהדר בקודש. מלכותך אבניך, בוקי הים לפני משה ומרים. זה לי ענו ואמרו, זה לי ענו ואמרו. אדוני עמנו לעולם, לעולם ועד. אדוני עמנו לעולם, לעולם ועד. ונאמר כפלת, אדוני את יעקב, וגלו מיד חזק ממנו. ברוך אתה אדוני קהל ישראל.
With the voices of angels ringing in our ears, we rise together for our tefillah, page 166.
Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'konei Hakol, V'zocher Chastei Avot V'imahot, U'mevi Geula Livnei V'neihem, L'ma'an Shemo Be'ahava, Melech Ozer U'Moshia U'Magen, Baruch Atah Adonai, Magen Avraham Ve'ezrat Sarah, Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechayei HaKol Atah Rav Lehoshia, Mashiv HaRuach U'Morid HaGashem, Mechalkel Chaim Bechesed, Mechayei HaKol Berachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim Verofei Cholim, Umatir Asurim, Umek ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי הכל. אתה קדוש בשמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
Be seated. So how was that Mishkan, that first portable sanctuary, built? It was indeed the most successful fundraising campaign ever. But it wasn't just that the people brought all the stuff, had all the materials, gave all the funds. The Torah teaches us in this week's Torah portion that each individual person brought the gifts of their heart. Those who know how to spin threads, well, they wove and they brought their tapestries. Those that knew how to hammer the metals, they did that. Each person brought whatever it was that they had to give to build together the beauty of that tabernacle. So we take a few moments now of individual prayer, continuing, if you wish, with the words on the page, or as we meditate privately, perhaps reflecting a little on what are the gifts, what are the unique parts of ourselves that we might yet bring forward to enrich our community, to make our world just a little bit better. This week's double Torah portion brings us to the end of the book of Exodus. And whenever we reach a final chapter in a book of Torah, we close with 3 Hebrew words, chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek. Strength, strength, may we strengthen one another. As we turn to our prayer for healing, our Misha Berach, the words of which you can find in the middle of 371. Chazak, chazak, we draw strength from our tradition. We draw strength from the divine, but most importantly in this moment, nit chazek, we draw strength from one another, rising together as one community, sharing in these words, and then sharing some names in the middle.
Mekor habracha leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen.
This Shabbat, our Larchmont Temple family is especially praying for the health and healing of Nancy Hanley, Marlo Wiggins, Dick Stone, Hannah Stampelman, Enid Elton, Jody Kahn, Stanley Tereski, Bob Glassman, Andy Rosenthal, Sandy Warshaw, Paul Wiggins, Joseph Spinelli, Samuel Philip Lear, Pat Ryan, Jerry Gallner, Ian Spear, Julie Ross, Megan Kearney-Bailey, Dan Zimmerman, Aaron Serkman, Tyler Grad, Alan Grad, Joanne Tobin, Evelyn Silberg, Abby Zatoon, Michael Schur, Renee Leopold, Stephen Stampelman, Judah Luria, Ben Myers, Joel Brill, Josh Olean, Drew Olean, Brad Dembski, Barry Fenner, Gabriel Morse, Matt Cleary, Jean Cott. And to their names, we add any for whom you are praying tonight.
Mekor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen. We're on page 586. Yeah.
Our on-deck B'nai Mitzvah family should come on up, because you're opening the Ark.
Sabrina.
They know who they are.
Owen, tonight's the only night Owen can come. Can Owen come too? Oh, Owen's a few weeks from now.
Oh, Owen, this is the only night you can come, so you come on up too. Come on. Anybody else who's becoming a bar mitzvah for the next 3 or 4 years, come on up. Okay.
Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol, latekedu lal yotzer breshit, shelo asanu kegoyei haratzot, velo samanu kemishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu korim
Bayom hahu, bayom hahu, yeh Adonai echad, u'shemo, u'shemo, u'shemo echad. Kaddish, of course, is the affirmation of the inestimable worth of every human being, and likewise, the timeless link each human life makes real through the blessing of memory. The masters of the Hasidim teach us, one who thinks they cannot live without others is mistaken. One who thinks others cannot live without them is even more mistaken. Remembering the treasured souls who may be gone from this life, but whose love will never die, not so long as we remember. We call by name the Yortzeites observe this Shabbat of George Grossman, Faye Kaufman, Margot Bernstein, Joseph Lovestock, Regina Chollet, Yitzhak Haber, Eugene Myers, June Bloch, Rudolph Louis, Elsie Easton, Robert Tauber, Stephen Janowitz, Arlene Fine, Adeline Baum, Murray Whitner, Edward Eininger, Harold Goldman, Clara Scheuer, David Scheuer, Stephen Joseph Waldman, Tom Silverberg, Mary Leibowitz, Norma Haber, David Halpert, Marvin Sains, Solon Finkelstein, Gary Mash, Andrea Hauben, Murray Camlet, Murray Robinson, David Grossman, Robert Cassidy, Leslie Handler, Stanley Foster, Ernest Bing, Bernie Korn, Ralph S. Marks, Rose A. Solomon, Stephen Weiss, Frida Wellner, Muriel Edith Einhorn, Edith Solomon, Eugene Neuer, Henry Sobel, Hannah Marks, Minnie Sternlicht, and past president of the congregation, Larry Sobel. To those names, we link those who've left us in the past 30 days, Shaloshim, Claire Zuckerman, mother of Mark and Larry, grandma of Aaron and Jonah, predeceased by her husband, Irv. Maria Mendes Carlos, mother of David, Joseph, Daniel, Carlos, Domingos, Fernando, Paula, and Julio, grandmother of 20, great-grandma of 4. Marilyn Garber, grandmother of 6, including our member Matt Felder. Marcia Wofsy, mother of Elizabeth, Daniel, and Ann, grandma of 7, great-grandma of 10, predeceased by past president of our congregation, her husband Bob. And this week, Harold Margolin, father of Amy, Shelley, and Deb, grandfather of 7, great-grandfather of 5, predeceased by his wife Elaine. And Laurie Parkinson, mother of Will, Alex, Matt, and Charlie, daughter of Barbara, sister of Stephen Bryan, partner of Kevin, predeceased by her dad 3 days earlier, Gene Cohn. Anyone here add a name in sacred remembrance? We join together on page 598 in words of Kaddish. Yit gadal v'yit kadash shemei rabba be'alma divrach herutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon v'yomechon u'v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael ba'agala v'zman kari v'imru amen yehei shmei rabba mevorach le'olam u'lomei maya Yitbarach v'yishtabach pa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shemei d'kudsha barichu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tush b'chata v'nechamata da'mi ran be'alma v'imru amen yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim alenu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen oseh shalom b'imromav Hu yaseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru. Amen. Zichronam livracha. May their memories be our blessing. Amen. Is any officer announcing? I don't know. Is any officer announcing? It's like you, Michael, the president of the congregation. Get up here. What are you doing?
Shabbat Shalom. I'm Michael Nathan. I'm president of the temple, and I'd like to welcome you all here tonight. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Perry and Lila on becoming B'nai Mitzvah tomorrow. I know your families will be looking forward to you leading everyone in prayer, teaching Torah, and teaching them what you've studied over the last few years. And I hope you all enjoy the day. In a little while, we'll be hearing from Rabbi Carol Balin, who will be our scholar in residence. It's a full weekend. After tonight, she will be talking at Hevra Torah tomorrow at 9 o'clock, and then on Sunday at the Brotherhood Breakfast. We first met Rabbi Balin not in a temple, but 9 years ago, and it's hard to believe 9 years ago, when our two sons were freshman roommates. So we've known it for quite some time. And Daniel, I think, will be watching tonight. The Women's Passover Seder is coming up on March 23rd. You can sign up online for that. The nominating committee, our annual nominating committee, is having the open congregational meeting on March 20th from 7:30 to 8 o'clock in the Axelrod room. And we have the Refugee Shabbat, which is coming up on Friday, March 31st. And there's plenty of more going on. Just read the weekly email. Shabbat Shalom.
We close as we begin. It's too much pressure. Too much pressure. Open the doors, open your eyes, open your heart, see what's inside. At least you can do the first one and the last one. Here we go. Open the door. Open your eyes. Open your heart. See what's inside. Lay down your walls. Lay down your walls. Lay down your fears. Lean into love. You are welcome here. Maker of day. Let's get some harmony going. Maker of night. Feed me with song. Let me be your light. Hine matov. Umanayim. Shevet achim. Gam yachad. Just our voices. Hine matov. Umanayim. Shevet achim. Gam yachad. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom.
But don't go anyplace. It's still Shabbat, and we haven't had our great Torah, which is why we're all here. And I just want to say how awesome, you guys together. Just what a gift, all of us. Rabbi Carol Balin, shut this off, professor of Jewish history for 2 decades at HUC-JIR, Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion, our seminary in New York. First woman there to become professor emerita currently the chair of the board of the Jewish Women's Archive, having created and curated the celebrated national traveling exhibit, Bat Mitzvah Comes of Age, and likewise the creator of many other things, but creator and narrator of the animated short, The Click Moment, Jewish Feminism 101, is especially meant to be here during this covenant learning moment of memory and meaning. For inspirational innovator, visionary researcher, and teacher that she is, Rabbi Balin has taken history and made it our story. How? In the words of the late Chief Rabbi of the British Commonwealth, the Lord Jonathan Sacks, knowing the story of my people, my being a Jew compels me to hear its call to write the next chapter. For history is not the distant past, rather, it is my story, the story of 100 generations that live on in me. Rejuvenating history by telling the stories that enable us to hear in them our very own story, helping us to see who we as Reformed Jews today must aspire to be, we could not be more grateful to welcome back home to LT, covenantal thinker, transformational teacher, our LT Spring Scholar, Rabbi Carol Balin.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. It is so nice to be back. I love it here. I've been here quite a few times. I think the last time was right before everything hit. It was for Rabbi Frankel's installation, and it's just a pleasure to be here. The service was exquisite. Kol hakavod to the cantors, to the rabbis, and thank you to your president, who I know personally and look forward to spending more time with. So it's especially appropriate that I'll be speaking tonight about widening our Jewish tent and inclusion in a Reformed Jewish context. It happens to be Women's History Month. I happen to be very interested in this topic. It happens to be part of your memory year of thinking about the past and where this congregation fits in. So I got my own. Let me see if that works. So, Reform Judaism has offered a lot to the world and to the Jewish world in particular. Is it better if I speak into the mic? I'm very hooked up here with tech, but I can speak into this, if that's better. And what the three, in my mind, the three most important innovations that Reformed Judaism brought to the world are, number one, egalitarianism, which we'll be speaking about tonight. Number two, tikkun olam, we'll be speaking about tomorrow morning when we talk about imagining sanctuaries and the kind of sanctuary that you have created here in Larchmont. And third, inclusion, which of course is related to the first. Over the years, Reformed Judaism has widened the tent ever more expansively through time. I want to do a very brief walkthrough with you of those points of inclusion over time, hitting some high notes, namely in 1848, which is where we'll start our journey this evening. We will wind up in 2015, but we're really winding up in 2023, of course. And you see here, I've kind of drawn a timeline upward as we imagine lifting up the Jewish people to higher and higher ways of making an inclusive place for all Jews, really all peoples, to be part of our communities. Way back when, in roughly 1854 or so, Isaac Mayer Wise, who's known as the founder of Reformed Judaism, came to this country in the middle of the 19th century, wound up first in Albany, New York, and then after, believe it or not, a fist fight on the Bema during the high holidays because of his views on having mixed seating, namely women and men sitting together, makes his way to Cincinnati and founds in 1875 the Hebrew Union College, the Rabbinical School. In 1877, the Conference for All Rabbis, the collegial organization. He said already in the 1850s what you see before you. The principle of justice and the law of God inherent in every human being demands that women be admitted to membership in the congregation. That is, that they should be given equal rights with man, so that her religious feelings be allowed scope for the sacred cause of Israel. You can tell he was not a native English speaker. That's not quite how we'd put it maybe today, but the sentiment remains true. Here you have Isaac Mayer Wise as a young man, and I go to the next slide to show you what I call Wise's whys and wherefores. He was not a feminist in the sense that I would call myself today. He really believed in an essentialist sense of men and women. He thought men should be out in the world producing, and women he saw as living on an elevated spiritual plane. So he had a particular purpose for women in Reform Judaism. And here you see on the slide, he said, women's contributions to congregational life would lead to a purer, more moral, more reformed, and that was the word he used, reformed Judaism for all. Why? Because if women and men sit together in pews, he said, what we called family pews, there would be a greater sense of order and decorum. Women should be involved in the Sabbath schools, the religious schools. Why? Because of their maternal influences. Women should sing in the choirs, he said, because women understand music better than men. And finally, women should be enfranchised. They should be considered members of a congregation and not just the spouses of their husbands who are members, because uniquely female hearts and piety would hold sway over congregational meetings. So it's not our form of how we think about equal rights, I would say, on gender equity in 2023, but he certainly was on to something. This is in the 1850s. It would take 120 years for women to become ordained as rabbis in the Reform movement. There were a few foremothers, I would call them, before Sally Priesand is ordained a rabbi, almost exactly 50 years ago. About 51 years ago, she became a rabbi, the first woman to be ordained by a seminary in the world. But there were a few foremothers before her, and I want to introduce you to them. In 1890, we have Ray Frank, who was called the Girl Rabbi of the West. Ray Frank was a journalist for the San Francisco Chronicle, and she arrived in Spokane, Washington in the 1890s, only to realize that there were no services planned for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, which were happening at that season. She said, you know what, Jews of Spokane, if you find a place, I'll preach for you. And she did. And it was such a success that she preached not only on Rosh Hashanah, but also on Yom Kippur. Now, Ray Frank was a journalist through and through and had no aspirations to become a rabbi. However, in 1921, you see here Martha Newmark. Martha Newmark, in 1921, was a student at Hebrew Union College. Her father, David Newmark, was a professor of philosophy at the school. And Martha Newmark was one of a dozen or so, probably 24 rabbinical students in 1921. She had started, along with her male counterparts, as an undergraduate, went for 4 years, and then assumed after these preparatory courses she would carry on and enter the rabbinate. She saw no reason why not. In fact, she had felt called to the rabbinate when she became confirmed, not bat mitzvah, but confirmed. The Reform movement preferred confirmation as opposed to bat mitzvah or bar mitzvah. That's a whole other lecture, and that's one I actually gave here years ago when you were kind enough to host the bat mitzvah exhibit about 10 years ago. But Martha Newmark felt during her confirmation ceremony when she read Torah, she felt called by God to become a rabbi. And it never occurred to her that being a girl would stand in her way. She lived in Cincinnati, as I said. Her father was a professor at Hebrew Union College. She enrolled intending to become a rabbi. Well, in 1921, remember that's a year after women got the vote in this country, so it's significant, right, timing in terms of American history, let alone Jewish history. Martha asks to be placed in a congregation for the high holidays like her male counterparts would be the following fall. This precipitates a debate on the campus of Hebrew Union College, then only in Cincinnati. Now their campus is elsewhere. The faculty votes in favor of allowing Martha to have a high holiday pulpit, which would then lead her to becoming ordained as a rabbi. The president of HUC at the time, Kaufman Kohler, decided that the larger community should be polled, and it sent out to rabbis, Reform rabbis at the time, who are meeting that summer in Atlantic City. They ultimately decide in favor of Martha Newmark's request and hope someday that she will become their colleagues. The fact, I argue, that their wives, these rabbis' wives who were meeting in Atlantic City, were allowed to speak, to give their opinions, I think maybe had held the day and helped pass that vote. Regardless, the Board of Governors of HUC turned down the request, and Martha Newmark went to school for 7.5 years, was given a degree called Superintendent of Schools, the one and only one in the history of HUC, and it would take another 50 years, almost to the day, for Sally Prisan to become ordained at HUC. Meanwhile, it's worth noting, Regina Jonas, who you see here, was ordained privately by a rabbi in Germany. In 1935, you see her here, she was known as Rabbiner Regina Jonas. She became a rabbi, and shortly thereafter, as the male rabbis of Germany started to either leave the country altogether or be sent to concentration camps, she began to fill in for their roles. Eventually, the Nazis caught up with her, and she was sent to Theresienstadt and eventually was killed at Auschwitz. Nobody knew of her ordination. It was hidden in the archives of Germany until the wall fell, the Berlin Wall fell in the early 90s, and that's when we learned of Regina Jonas. So when Sally Prisan became ordained in 1972, here she is with her classmates. I circled her so you could see her among the men. Sally knew a little bit about Regina Jonas, but the world really did not know about Regina Jonas till much later. Sally Prisan became a rabbi, as I said, about almost 50 years and 8 months or so ago, when she went up to the Bima to receive her ordination from the president of Hebrew Union College. Her classmates spontaneously stood, all 35 men, and applauded her. Quite moving. Here you see Sally Prisan pictured in what's known as, and they're making a comeback apparently, what are known as super sister cards. There was a young girl who lived up in upstate New York, and she once said to her mother, "Mom, how come there's no girls on cards like there are for baseball players and for the boys?" And her mother and her mother's sister created this pack of super sister cards. And they reached out to women across the country to ask if they would be willing to have their picture and a little bit of a bio on the back on these cards. Sally responded almost right away. She's number 6 in the deck, which includes Susie, I'm forgetting her name, the chapstick. She used to do the chapstick commercials. I'm dating myself, but the gold medal skier, among others. I have this picture in here in terms of inclusion. I don't know how well you can see the picture, but it's a bunch of only at this point male and female rabbis married to each other in some kind of mattress store. Believe it or not, only 2 of them are still married. I think there's 5 of them here. But this, I think, speaks volumes about what it meant for women to enter the field and, in all kinds of ways, what that meant for the Jewish people. In talking about inclusion, I have to mention Alexander Schindler, pictured here, born in 1925, died in 2000. It's unbelievable, it's been that many years. Alexander Schindler was the president of what was then known as the Union of American Hebrew Congregations, now known as the Union of Reform Judaism, the umbrella organization of Reform Judaism. And in the 1970s, very early on in the history of American Jewry and our sense about outreach, creates a whole program of outreach. And these are his words. We must remove the not wanted signs from our hearts. We are opposed to intermarriage. This is again writing in 1978. We've come in a totally different direction now. But we cannot reject the intermarried. And we cannot but be aware that in our current behavior, we communicate rejection if Jews by choice often feel alienated by our attitudes and behavior. How much more alienated do the non-Jewish spouses feel, of our children feel? I believe, this is in 1978, trailblazer, I believe that it is time for our reform movement to launch a carefully conceived outreach program aimed at all Americans who are unchurched and who are seeking roots in religion. This was extraordinarily controversial, as you can imagine, in 1978, and now it is the way of Jewish life, which translates, by the way, as halakha. Halakha is the Hebrew word for the Jewish legal codes, the sort of overarching Jewish legal codes, but it literally means way. And I argue, this is the way. And he charted the path to open the tent wider and wider. I want to say another word because it happens to be March 17th. Someone pointed out to me, I'm not Irish at all, but I guess I'm in the mode of wearing green. Tomorrow is the 101st anniversary of Bat Mitzvah. Namely, the first Bat Mitzvah girl was called to the Torah during a worship service. It took place in New York City. I won't go into all the great details about it, but I mention these girls because in many ways, allowing a girl up to the bima was revolutionary, radical. The girls who became Bat Mitzvah, beginning in 1922, 100 years ago, and in the 30s and in the 40s and the 50s, were trailblazers. They were pioneers. Many of them were not interested at the age of 12 or 13 in getting in front of 100, 200 people in their congregation and all their close family and friends. But they did it. They stepped into the limelight, and I argue they paved the way for Sally Prisan and me and Leora and all the other, Eve Ruden's here, all the other women rabbis and then cantors who came along after her. Those girls of 12 and 13 who read from the Torah for the first time ever, who in their congregations, who created a female presence on the bima, paved the way for their foremothers. The Sally Prisans of the world, and also the women of their congregation who realized, hey, these girls are doing it, we can do it. And sure enough, by the late 1980s and into the 90s, adult bat mitzvah becomes extraordinarily popular, and also bar mitzvah for those who were either didn't have the option to have a bar or bat mitzvah when they were young, were not Jewish when they were 12 or 13, or simply had not decided to do it. So just a shout out to those girls because their anniversary is tomorrow. Carrying on from Alexander Schindler, as I said, in 1978, he starts this program of outreach. By 1983, the Reform rabbis of America pass a resolution that's known as patrilineal descent in 1983. The Central Conference of American Rabbis, even to this day, is the collegial organization of Reform rabbis. They vote together to pass this amendment, and you see, I have it highlighted, the part I'll say it loudly, but let me read it, the opening to you at least. The CCAR, that is the Collegial Organization of Reform Rabbis, declares that the child of one Jewish parent is under the presumption of Jewish descent. Just let me stop for a moment. According to halakha, according to Jewish law, according to Jewish tradition, a child of a Jewish mother is Jewish, that's the end of it. If your father's Jewish and your mother's not Jewish, according to halakha, you're not considered Jewish unless you convert. You undergo an act of conversion. Here, a corrective is being made. After thousands of years, Reform rabbis are acting as trailblazers, are opening the tent wider and wider and saying, you know what? Whether the mother's a Jew or the father's a Jew, if that child has a Jewish parent, that child is presumed to be Jewish. And then they go on. This presumption of the Jewish status of the offspring of any mixed marriage or interfaith marriage is to be established through appropriate and timely public and formal acts of identification with the Jewish faith and people. In other words, this is not an automatic status of being considered Jewish, but what this means is if your child undergoes a ritual of circumcision or has a girl baby naming ceremony, if they become bar bat mitzvah, if they undergo confirmation, if they are publicly identifying with the Jewish people, that child is considered Jewish. This overturned thousands of years, about 1,500 years of Jewish history, and marked a path for families who are of multi-faith parents to welcome children into the Jewish covenant so long as one of those parents is Jewish and that child undergoes public acts of Jewish identity. This was, again, extremely controversial in 1983. I was in rabbinical school a few years after that. People were still debating it like crazy. Now it is an axiom of Reform Judaism. I don't know of any Reform rabbi who would not abide by this, any Reform congregation who isn't welcoming children of multi-faith families into the synagogue. And the conservative movement and other trans-denominational movements have caught on to this. And it's the way forward. It's the way of the world. In 1977, again, talking about opening the tent, we're backtracking a little bit. Patrilineal descent was 83. Now I'm going back to 77. In terms of resolutions on what they called homosexuality, I mean LGBTQ, I mean what we call now, which slips off our tongue. In those days, the word was homosexuality. So these are the resolutions on gay and lesbian Jews that were created by, again, the CCAR, the Collegial Organization of Reform Rabbis, beginning in 77. 1977, think about those of you of a certain age, my age, where you were in 1977 and what the world looked like, to imagine that these rabbis were in the forefront of the fight for LGBTQ rights. In 1977, the CCAR adopted a resolution calling for legislation decriminalizing homosexual acts. We're still in a phase in this country where homosexuality was considered, the law could get involved. In 1990, this is already 13 years after that, the CCAR endorsed the report of an ad hoc committee that they had formed as task force on homosexuality in the rabbin. Again, the language is harsh. It's not the language we use these days, but back in 1990, this is what was used. The position paper urged that, quote, all rabbis, regardless of sexual orientation, be accorded the opportunity to fulfill the sacred vocation that they have chosen, namely, Hebrew Union College, which is the seminary of the Reform movement, could no longer discriminate against people who were gay or lesbian. They could be open when they applied to school, and they could maintain that identity, obviously, through school and be ordained as rabbis. I was in school at this time. I was ordained in 1991 when this resolution was just being passed by the Reform rabbis, but the school had not quite caught up. And I remember those of us who were married at the time, and gay, straight students, we decided as a class that we would not wear our wedding bands when we interviewed for jobs, so that nobody, because at the time it was not legal yet for gays and lesbians to be married to each other in this country. We took off our rings so that we wouldn't be assumed about what our marital status was, and it wouldn't be assumed that I'm straight. If I wasn't wearing my ring, then they couldn't start guessing, what people's sexuality was. So that was, it was a long time ago, but not a long time ago when we think about the long Jewish past. In 1996, The CCAR, again, supports the rights of gay and lesbian couples to share fully and equally in the rights of civil marriage. And by that point, Reform rabbis were already consecrating marriages between lesbians and gay people, regardless of state law. As I said, I was ordained in 91, and that was happening, but by 96, you see this resolution about civil marriage. And I'll end, I guess I'll end around on my next slide. This is the most recent opening wider and wider of the tent. I mean, this is from 2015, and we've come a long way even since then. These are the CCI resolutions on the rights of transgender and gender nonconforming individuals. I guess we might say non-binary today, though nonconforming, I know there's lots of different, agender, pangender, there's lots of different ways to describe gender identity these days. But here in 2015, number one, that was the year before Trump was elected. In 2015, number one, the CCAR affirms its commitment to the full equality, inclusion, and acceptance of people of all gender identities and gender expressions. Number two, the CCAR affirms the right of transgender and gender nonconforming individuals to be referred to by the name, gender, and pronoun of preference in our congregations, camps, kids, and schools, religious schools, regardless of physical presentation. I am proud to be a part of the reform movement that continues to push the envelope, to be a realistic, practical, and caring at heart. At the essence of all of these steps to widen the tent is an approach of chesed, of compassion, of rachamim, of openness and empathy for other people. I'll stop there. I'm going to be at the dinner. I'd love to talk with any of you who may have questions. I look forward to greeting people at Chevra Torah tomorrow morning. We'll be discussing Tikkun Olam and the sanctuary we're building on earth. And then Sunday morning, and at Larchmont Temple, and on Sunday morning, I'll be talking about the who's who of Reformed Jews, providing a couple inspiring examples of leaders through time. So thank you for your attention. Shabbat Shalom. I'll leave all of that.
Pretty awesome, pretty awesome. You know, it occurred to me as Rabbi Balin was talking, one of the rabbinic names of God is Hamakom. Hamakom, which the rabbis call, which is the place. And so, you know, it just makes sense as Reformed Jews, as progressive Jews today in the world, what we want is a place for everybody in the place. Because when we're all together and when the tent is open wide and everybody has a place, that is where God dwells. We could not be more thrilled that you are here. Can't wait to see what's going to happen tomorrow at Chevra. You know, two important things. I believe we're in the social hall, and there will be bagels. I'm just saying. Not that I'm dangling a bagel in front of you, but there will be bagels. Are we going downstairs? We're in the garden room for dinner. We so look forward to joining you. Shabbat Shalom.